Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today is all about sugar. Have you ever eaten an indescribably large meal and felt so full, literally until someone mentions the word dessert? Or perhaps at the same time every day you raid the cupboards looking for a little sweet kick? I know that both are highly applicable to me and on a regular basis. So this week I've set out to find out the reason why. So this week's question is, why do we crave sugar? Cue the intro! Before we get started, if you're new to the channel, my name is Brandon and this channel is all about finding some simple answers to some not so simple questions. Each week, I've set myself a challenge of finding the answer to a new question and providing you guys with a simple explanation. First, a big thank you for all the love and support on last week's video, and we've even gotten the ball rolling on some questions in from you guys. Stay tuned. So that being said, let's crack on. So sugar is often labelled the bad guy of the food world, the proverbial apple in our foodie Garden of Eden, the scar of Pride Rock, the Voldemort of the dietary world. I promise I'll stop there. We all know how difficult sugar can be to resist, but before we delve into the reasons why, assessing the rise in sugar over the years will be really helpful. So how did our diets get so sugary? Here's 10,000 years in 2 minutes. Sugar has a long history. As I said, about 10,000 years long. The first known domestication of sugarcane dates back to 8000 BCE in New Guinea. In around 600 BCE, we start to see the first chemically refined sugar production kick off in India, and the next 1800 years consist of a slow spread of sugar production across the world, starting in Southeast Asia, through into China and Persia and reaching Europe in the 13th century. Large-scale sugar production grew exponentially when refinement techniques were transported to Brazil, partly for its favourable climate conditions, but also because what was happening at the time with the transatlantic slave trade meant that the huge increase in labour demand for crop cultivation could be met. Production then spread into the Caribbean, and sugar's grip on the world only tightened from there. By the 1800s, sugar production had become a thriving worldwide commercial industry. But then things get really interesting around the 1960s with the advent of high fructose corn syrup, the Hyde to sugar's Jekyll. In the recent past, high fructose corn syrup has been public enemy number one in the world of sweeteners and has undeniably influenced the rise in cheap and readily available, sugary, if you will, foods and drinks. To help tell the story, it's useful to know about the basic building blocks of the things we're talking about. Sugar, also known as sucrose, is made up of a 50-50 split between fructose and glucose. Now these are both monosaccharides, a fancy word, and you'll hear both of these terms a lot in this video. But just remember, like everything else in the world, these are just molecules made up of a few different elements that we just so happen to be able to eat. It all started in 1957, when a new process was discovered that enabled the conversion of glucose, which was derived from corn syrup, into fructose. From there, it became possible to combine glucose and fructose together to make something that wasn't sugar. After a decade, this process managed to churn out one substance that had 42% fructose and the rest glucose, and another substance that had 90% fructose. Now mix these two together and you've got a substance containing 55% fructose. And voila! You've got your sugar alternative in the form of high fructose corn syrup. Why is this significant? Well, up until this point, sugar had been the world's primary sweetener, but because of high taxes on imported cane sugar, and on the flip side, farming subsidies in America for growing corn, high fructose corn syrup became cheaper than sugar and had properties that made food and drink production easier. American corporates latched on, starting with Coca-Cola switching its sugar for high fructose corn syrup, and by 1984 the mass conversion was complete. So when we're talking about the rise of sugar and the world's sugar addiction, we can't be restricted to just talking about bog standard table sugar, because the industry isn't restricted to just bog standard table sugar. And in some cases, it's possible that the reasons we crave sugar are exacerbated by alternatives like high fructose corn syrup, but more on that later. So now you know why your supermarket aisles are stacked high, full of sugary treats. Here are some reasons why you might be dying to eat them. Reason number 1, evolution and psychology. Going back 10,000 years ago, and then quite some time before then, sources of sugar were not prevalent, and the prehistoric human diet didn't contain Haribos or Oreos. The best you might have swindled was a good old piece of fruit. But sugar serves a really useful purpose for your average Neanderthal, which is that it gets metabolized quickly and contains that glucose we mentioned earlier. Glucose is your body's petrol equivalent and is converted by your body to form ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is used by virtually all the cells in your body for energy. Because sugar has a very simple chemical structure, just fructose and glucose, it's able to be broken down or metabolized by your body very quickly. This means that you're able to get a quick burst of energy from that glucose that you've just absorbed, which would have been really handy if you were running away from predators a few thousand years ago. So your body knows that sugar serves a useful purpose to provide quick energy. Now the brain kicks in. During the process of evolution, humans have developed a reward system in the brain. This keeps you doing the things that your brain knows are helpful for you to survive, such as eating foods that will give you energy fast. Now the brain is a complex system, so we're going to try and keep this as simple as we can. When you eat sugar, there are two things at play. First, you like the sugar, and second, you want more of the sugar. When you look up why you crave sugar, there is a lot that will tell you that sugar activates the reward system, involving parts of the brain like the nucleus accumbens and releases dopamine that makes you happy. But this isn't quite the full picture. Whilst it was previously thought that dopamine was responsible for pleasure, it's now thought that dopamine plays more of a significant role in establishing learned patterns of behaviour by signalling to other areas of the brain that the action that you've just taken, i.e. eating sugar, is important for survival, and that will lead your body to wanting to do it again. On the pleasure front, it's less clear exactly what's happening in the brain when we get that feeling of pleasure from food. However, for our purposes, it's enough to know that evolutionarily there was a good reason for liking sugar, and the reward system makes your body want to eat it again. This function of the reward system hasn't left us, despite the abundance of sugar today, and is what plagues us with those pesky sugar cravings. I also mentioned psychology, and this heavily interlinks with the reward system that we've just described. From a young age, we're brought up with sugary foods functioning as rewards. Be it dessert for eating your vegetables, or cake for a celebratory birthday, we're instilled with the idea that sugars are something to be desired. This reinforces the reward nature of sugar. And what's more, that reward system that we described earlier can be activated even before actually eating the sugar. So having those treats dangled in front of you, or even possibly thinking sugary thoughts, can trigger those cravings in the brain. Reason number 2, habit. Behaviour can also be a strong reason for craving sugar. Despite the fact that your body might not need any nutrition, emotional and environmental conditions can increase your appetite even when you're not hungry. And these environmental stimuli can form conditioned habits. This is where classical conditioning takes centre stage. Normally, unconditioned stimuli, such as the smell of food, results in unconditioned responses, such as feeling hungry. But suppose every time you smell that food, you also see a particular image or hear a particular sound. The pairing of the neutral stimulus, the particular image or sound, with the unconditioned stimulus, the smell of the food, can mean that even when the smell isn't present, you get a conditioned response of feeling hungry. This can result in things like craving popcorn when watching a movie, or wanting a refreshing can of Coke on a hot summer's day. Who would have thought that marketing experts have been manipulating us for years? This conditioned response can also manifest itself in the habits that you have developed. Eating a snack at the same time each day, or having dessert straight after dinner, can condition you to feel hungry in those situations. Reason number 3, low blood sugar levels. Now this is a very normal reason for craving sugar. Your blood sugar levels fluctuate depending on when and how much you've eaten. When you're super high on glucose, your blood sugar levels rise and your body produces insulin to allow glucose to be taken up by other cells in your body. But when you haven't eaten and your blood sugar levels are low, your body produces a hormone called ghrelin, which plays a vital role in appetite regulation. This hormone rises when you're fasting and peaks before the consumption of a meal. Ghrelin functions to send signals from your stomach up to a region of the brain called the hypothalamus. This region controls satiety, and ghrelin activates those parts of the hypothalamus that increase appetite. Again, knowing that sugar is a quick fix for glucose leads you straight to those pick and mix stands. Reason number 4, fructose and appetite. I said before that you'd hear about glucose and fructose a lot in this video. Well, strap in because we're about to ramp it up. Fructose and glucose are metabolized differently by your body. Whereas glucose is used all around your body, the majority of fructose goes straight to your liver. Here, a lot of that fructose gets metabolized and converted into fatty acids, and research suggests that this can contribute to fatty liver disease. But research also points to something else. There's some evidence that fructose and glucose can have different effects on your appetite. Whilst glucose suppresses appetite, which makes sense after food intake, research suggests that in some circumstances, fructose can actually increase your appetite. Researchers found that fructose raised ghrelin levels, the hunger hormone, and increased activity in the hypothalamus, the area of the brain responsible for appetite regulation. What does this mean? Well, there is a chance that consuming fructose can actually make you hungrier. The evidence is very inconclusive at this stage, and more research is needed before we can draw any solid conclusions. But given the rise in high fructose corn syrup that I mentioned earlier, and its higher ratios of fructose, this could pose a very interesting reason as to why we have cravings for sweet things. On a side note, you may be rightly thinking at this point that fruit also contains fructose. This is true, but fruit also contains a fibre matrix that surrounds the fructose, which means that your body is able to break the fruit down more slowly, leading you to feel fuller for longer. So don't worry, you can still eat fruit. So that's 4 reasons we may crave sugar. To recap, we've got number 1, evolutionary and psychological reasons stemming from that reward pathway. Number 2, behavioural reasons and those conditioned responses. Number 3, fluctuating blood sugar levels. And number 4, possible effects of fructose on appetite regulation. Of course, these aren't the only reasons. Things like sleep and stress can also have an effect on your sugar cravings. Now, with all that information, you're probably mostly craving the foods that I mentioned in this video. I know I am. But if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more videos in the future. If you have any questions that you've always wanted to know the answer to, please don't hesitate to include them in the comments below, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.